Om Sadashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Ishvaro Guratmeti Muchi Veda Vibhagine Vyomada Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Sava Vedanta Siddhanta Gocharam Tamagocharam Govindam Paramanantam Satiguru Pranatosh Maham Om Om Shanti, Om Shanti Shanti Om. And we begin today. Welcome everyone. We begin today Vivekachudamani verse 62, right? Last week we saw we begin this new title, this new chapter called The Self, your essential nature, before we have analyzed the koshas in detail. So we end up with Anandamaya kosha, and then we began talking about Atma, the self. No longer meaty stuff, now we are talking about Satya, the self, our essential nature. So the verse 61 said that the self-awareness can be known by anyone with discrimination, and this gave us the room for a nice Q&A last Thursday as well. It says that the self is self-luminous, and it's a partless whole. So it's important that we know that the self is whole and complete, but it's not a whole made out of parts, because we may have this understanding, that, oh, but it's a whole because it is constituted by many different parts or constituents, but no, the self is a partless whole. It means to say there's nothing but consciousness existence. And it has nothing to do with the 5 sheaths. It has nothing to do. It is the witness of the 3 states of experience. It is changeless, and it does not change to experience. Nothing that the self comes in contact with, nothing that is illuminated by this conscious existence, nothing impacts or taint it, or change it, or mark it, or how you say? There's another word that does not come to mind. But anyhow, we begin today on the verse 62. The inquirer said then, okay, teacher, I have negated the 5 sheaths, but after I have negated everything, I'm left with emptiness only. Is there something else to be known through this self-inquiry? So this is a very nice verse. I enjoy this verse very much, because we always say that we need to come to a point of rejecting everything. So we need to negate everything, because the purpose or the invitation that we received from Vedanta is to reject and negate anything that appears within the scope of your conscious awareness. So everything that appears to me, I reject. Why I reject? I reject because I'm looking for myself. I'm looking to redefine myself. I got involved with objects that appear within my light of awareness. And now I need to separate myself, the light of the illuminator, from all objects. This is Vedanta, the ultimate, finest sadhana of Vedanta is discriminating the subject, that which does not change, and it's not subject to time, that from any and everything that comes. So, and then we go reject this, reject that, we negate, and then we negate the koshas. Physical body we have negated already long ago, because we understood that we are not the body. And then we have a little bit more trouble to negate the subtle body. because we have the feeling that the subtle body is something more intimate, you know, my emotions, my feelings, my memories that makes up my history, my life, my personality, you know. So and then I go to my ego, my self-image, you know, the way I see myself, and then my intellect with my notions and concepts and my ability to understand things, to have a sharp intellect or not. So all these things in the subtle body, it's a little bit more subtle. Therefore, it's a little bit more difficult to negate. But the Vivekachudamani invites us to negate everything. We negate the 5 sheaths, means to say that we negate even the intellect, and then we negate the Anandamaya quotient. So Anandamaya quotient is important to understand, because the Anandamaya quotient that we're experiencing in deep sleep has basically no value, no spiritual value. It just serves the purpose to rest the body-mind complex, you understand? And to rejuvenate and refresh it a little bit. So, but spiritually speaking, it has basically no value. But there is another state, in the awakened state, in which the mind is somehow resolved, and we experience this beautiful peace, this beautiful contentment and satisfaction, which is beyond, it's past any understanding. We just like, wow, you know. And we gain that by doing a lot of spiritual sadhanas. But we also gain as a samsari every time that things are really happening according to my likes and dislikes. When I'm really accomplishing, when my parabdha karma is good and I have a lot of punya and things are really in harmony with my desires and aversion. So, and then my mind gets resolved. And then we experience something that in the world of yoga, we easily take it to be the self, you know, this peace, this satisfaction, this silence, you know. People go and they pay a lot of money to go and meditate, just to experiencing a little bit of silence. But as Yanis, we say that we reject everything. We reject even this experience of Anandamaya Kosha. So we negate the 5 sheaths, we negate the Anandamaya Kosha. And why it's important to understand that? Because when we negate the Anandamaya Kosha, we negate that silence, that peace, that emptiness, you know? So we are negating everything. Because here the inquirer said, I have negated everything. I even negate the intellect itself. I negate the intellect, and then duality has disappeared. There was nothing happening, and then there was deep silence and emptiness. And then Vedanta comes back and say, reject that as well. Understand? Reject that as well. And the inquirer here was in a position that say, you know, I have rejected everything, and I thought I was going to find this great self, this wonderful, marvelous kind of Brahman or Paramatma, or, you know, this extraordinary being. And now I find myself with nothing, with emptiness, you know. And just imagine how frustrating, how disappointing it may be for someone who is believing that he is going to experience the self, that he's going to find the self as an object, you know. He said, I only see emptiness. So is there something else to be known through this inquiry? It's not possible. I need to discover myself. I need to find myself. And I cannot be this silence. I cannot be this emptiness, you know. And moreover, emptiness is depressing, because I want to gain something in this game, in this spiritual game. I want to gain something. I don't want to walk away with nothing or emptiness. Huh? So what the inquiry is missing here, we all know that. So he's seeing that he negates everything, and then there is kind of emptiness. There is nothing. And then he's missing what? I mean, we don't need to negate everything to understand who we are, you understand? This is an extreme example of someone who went all the way into yoga until he rejected everything and he found himself in samadhi, in which there is nothing, there is emptiness. We don't need to do that. Vedanta does not encourage people to go to the nothingness experience, to the emptiness experience. But somehow there is a notion that if I negate everything, and then I will be more easily I will find myself. Okay, but there is no need, because the light of the illuminated is conscious existence light, in which all these phenomena objects, all these objects of experience come and stay and go. So this light of consciousness, awareness, existence, it's always present in the absence or in the presence of objects of experience. So we don't need to really have the experience of emptiness. But this guy, he went all the way and he found emptiness. And he's a little bit like, oh my God, I mean, what is the self here? Is there nothing else to be known through this inquiry? Have I to be left empty-handed with emptiness here? So what he's missing? He's missing the light of conscious awareness, that in which present objects and the absent object can be witnessed, known, experienced. So he is missing the obvious, the light of consciousness existence. And he is attached yet to the world of objects. If before he was having attachment to object, therefore he was trying to negate and reject, now he is left with another object, which is the absence of dense and tangible object, which is by itself an object. Why we say that emptiness is an object? And David, why we say that emptiness is an object?
Well, I guess anything that's not the subject is an object. And what I'm actually was writing down was this attachment to an object, emptiness. Is this really a reluctance to let go of ego? Is this an attachment to ego? So that's the question I was going to write down for Thursday. But since you...
Yeah, no, it's a good point. That's a good angle. But your answer was correct. So why we say that emptiness or the absence of object is by itself an object? Because we know, and it's something known to us, something that appears to us, you know, we have experienced samadhi, we have experienced emptiness, we have experienced silence, we have experienced no thoughts. So the absence of something does not necessarily, you know, turns something into nothing. No, nothingness is something because it happens within the light of consciousness. And if it's happening, it must be an object in reference to consciousness. So it's something other than the subject. Therefore, we know that, okay, I see only emptiness, I experience only silence. Okay, and then we know that there is an object. So once we understand that, we are no longer seduced by these notions and experiential ideas of silence and emptiness, because we know it's just an object. And here it's saying that I have negated, even Anandamaya Kosha, the 5 sheaths, okay? I have negated that emptiness. I have negated that pure reflection of consciousness, even in a scientific mind, because that again is an experience. That again is an object. How do I know is that is an object? Because it's happening to me. It's something other than myself. I am the light and I cannot be experienced. You understand? And people may get frustrated about that because, I mean, I'm a junk. I'm experiencing junk and I want to experience the self. But the self is not an object of experience because it's the absolute subject. That which can objectify everything, but will never be able to objectify itself. The same way the eyes can see the entire world and will never be able to turn around and see it themselves. You understand? So, of course, the eyes can see themselves with the help of a mirror, the same way the self can be seen by the intellect of the jiva, by the means of another mirror called Vedanta, the mirror of worlds, the words, the Upanishad words. Okay? So is there anything else to be known through inquiry. This reminds me of a conversation I had with someone yesterday. Recently, I did a satsang in Portuguese, and there was one guy that was already since a while suffering so badly. I don't know if Lucy was with us on last Wednesday. There was a person, I had a Q&A satsang last Wednesday with the Brazilian Sangha, and one guy was already dragging himself with a lot of pain since quite a while, and he opened up and he started talking. And I told him it's better we talk privately because he was going through such a frustration, such a pain and suffering. And he was trying to say, I don't know. I mean, I have the impression that the search, the seeking is over. I understood, but I'm left with so much suffering. And I was having a hard time to understand that position. You know, I say, fuck. I mean, when you really understand, when you really drop the search, the seeking, so usually you feel lighter, you know. And then only yesterday I couldn't understand his situation because I called him to find out how he was doing. And he explained better, he explained me his process, and then I understood. He was having these marvelous ideas that when he finds the self, he would have a great time, beautiful experience, a lot of firework, and he would get recognition. It was going to be something so positive and so great and so luminous, and everybody was going to know, see him, now you are enlightened, and so on. And he found this enlightenment thing, this realization, the most ordinary thing, like Ranji likes to put, you know. And and then I understood his ego was so disappointed. He was suffering, and he was crying for days and days without understanding. And it was painful because it was his ego was still trying to co-opt this understanding, you know, and the ego was suffering and crying, oh my God, I want to be an enlightened ego, you know, and the ego does not get enlightened. Huh? The ego understands that he is the light of consciousness, but he does not become enlightened one and so on. And because he was not really understand where that pain was coming, and the day I spoke to him with the whole group, I couldn't get to the point. So I had the opportunity to clarify that with him. But it's about this. I mean, when you come to a point that you say, okay, so now I know I'm none of this experience, there is nothing, I cannot know myself experientially and so on. And at the same time, I'm not having any extraordinary epiphany here, you know, I just understood something. And it may be disappointing to the ego, to the proportion that the ego may have had so much expectations about this whole deal of enlightenment. You understand? Anyhow, the guy is doing very well. He's so happy. And after the whole thing settled, and he's just calming down and enjoying this peace, this satisfaction, and his relationship with the world is changing, you know. And he's still a little bit settling in, but it was interesting. He was experiencing a total breakdown because enlightenment was not really what he had expected before. So the student of Vedanta must be prepared for annihilation of the world as he has habitually understood it. So the student of Vedanta must be prepared in the sense that it has to come to the maturity which allows the understanding that everything, any and all experience the world can provide, they are not going to do it, you know. Therefore, you can negate it. But if you negate it, but you negate something, thinking that something still has a lot of value, and then you're going to resent it. You understand? Because I make an effort to negate a lot of things here that have still great value. I'm still invested in those things that I'm negating. So the student needs to be very much prepared to understand that the world of objects is really deprived of value. Understand? Otherwise there will be some depression there. So it says here that the student of Vedanta must be prepared for the annihilation of the world as he has habitually understood it. He has understood the realities, duality, and the world of objects are there to provide me happiness and satisfaction. So it takes time to digest the fact that that is not so. This process of negating and understanding that objects are deprived of value can be unsettling, which is why the teaching can only be properly received, processed, digested, and integrated by those who possess certain qualifications. But no matter how well prepared we may be to see our conceptions of the world dissolve, so all these ideas about enlightenment, all these ideas about the world and so on, and to see all of that dissolve, and some of us are going to understand that then there is nothing there. There is nothing to be gained. There is only emptiness. So all of these are going to be dissolved because none of these objects have any real value. So this actual experience can be initially disorienting, leaving us with the sense of depression, desolation. The same desolation the student expressed in this verse. If negation of the 5 sheaths leaves us with a feeling of emptiness, the next question we should ask is, who is it that is feeling the emptiness? In other words, this emptiness, this silence, this absence of experience of objects, it's happening within what? It's happening to whom? Who is witnessing this emptiness? This absence of experience, of object of experience. So the question is always turn our perspective from the field of objects of experience, turn it again and again intellectually to the light in which all of those objects of experience are revealed, experienced, and known. Again and again, turning. And sometimes we get hooked with certain objects that we call this the objects of the spiritual world. And then those objects, they may be very seductive sometimes, but we need to be prepared to let them all go. If negation of the 5 sheaths leaves us with a feeling of emptiness, the next question is, who is it that experienced the emptiness? The self is whole and complete in its limitless awareness. And the self, as this Vivekachudamani begins stating, the self is of the nature of joy. So we have to remember that. I was having difficulty to understand the situation of that folk because, the self is of the nature of joy, peace, satisfaction. Why he's suffering so much and crying so much day after day, I was having trouble to understand his position. So the Vivekachudamani says that the self, if this initial experience of enlightenment leaves us with a sense of desolation, the student that we have to do some more work. If negation of the 5 sheaths leaves us with this feeling of emptiness and depression, the next question is, who is that feels empty? As the self is whole and complete, limitless, and of the nature of the joy, it cannot be experienced, the experience of this sense of desolation. So, if the self, this is very nice. If the self is of the nature of joy, like Vivekachudamani states in the first one verse, the self is of the nature of joy. The self cannot be that depressing experience, suffering experience of the individual who is unsettled about the fact that the self cannot be known and experienced as an object, that I'm lacking something here because I cannot find the fullness of the self in any object of experience. So as the self is whole and complete, limitless, and of the nature of joy, the self cannot be experienced. The experience of this sense of isolation. When the student says, I negate the 5 sheaths, etc., who is the I in that statement? Who is the I? The I is not the ego. My friend was suffering because there was still an identification with the ego that believed that once I negate everything, once I discriminate, and then I will be finding this whole, full, and complete self as an object of experience, and then it's going to be something so great, so vast, and so huge. So it's the ego. So if the self, when they say, I negate the 5 sheaths, so who is the I in that statement? It's not the ego. If it is the ego who says, I negate everything, and now I just find myself in emptiness. Okay? So we need to understand that the I am the light, in which emptiness now is the next game in Tao, is the next experience, the next object, happening to me. So that's what I am. I'm the light in which emptiness. So to free ourselves from this sense of desolation, we must realize that although we may believe we have negated the 5 sheaths, there is a residual doer and enjoyer. That's, it's so nice. I mean, I did not have time to read this before we met today. I was very busy. This is all about, I'm going to send to the folk I had a conversation yesterday. So to avoid this sense of desolation and frustration, when we really negate everything, we must realize that although we may believe we have negated the 5 sheaths, there is still a residual doer enjoy there. That's why we're still having trouble. You guys get it? Very nice, huh? Our intellect does the job, but there is the sense of doership was not completely neutralized or canceled. The ego is still there. The ego has certain spiritual vanity. The ego wants to be, the great enlightened one. And then there is this great disappointment. It's all due to this residual ignorance. The doer is still feeling like, I am the one doing and I am the one enjoying here. The I who believes it has done the negating. The I who believes it has done the negating has yet to be negated. You see how nice and subtle Luciana? Luciana is new with us, but I think she's following, huh? The I who believes, oh yes, I have done all the discrimination, I have negated everything. So this very I, this sense of doership, I, the enlightened one, I who have done the discrimination. So this I still has to be negated, or transcended in a more kind of esoteric language. It is this I, the ego, the intellect, who looks upon the loss of identification with the body-mind. He looks at the loss of identification with the body-mind and feels bereft. What's bereft? It feels
bereft means lacking or empty. Bereft of something, when something's taken away from you.
Yeah. It feels like lacking something. Yeah. The ego who looks upon the loss of identification with the body-mind and feels like, oh, something is lacking here. I lost something here. I did not gain anything. I lost, in fact, everything that before I was associated with. I have lost because I have negated all those bits and pieces that I used to relate to as a means to define myself. So once we just get rid of everything, this ego, rather than realize its fullness as consciousness, it may realize it is emptiness because he has lost all those notions by which he used to or she used to define herself, And then comes this condition, who am I now? It's very common. The Ramji often plays this example of people who come to him and say, okay, now I understood, I got it. And now what I'm gonna do now? That's what this folk in the Brazilian group were saying, now what I'm gonna do? Huh? Yesterday he was still talking a little bit like this. So now I don't know what to do with my life. I say, just don't do anything or do whatever Ishvara makes you do. But just keep your understanding and keep an eye on the ego. You know, otherwise you're gonna suffer. If you attach yourself to the ego, you're gonna suffer, you know. So keep an eye on the ego, keep association with the scriptures and with the teachers and so on. And just do whatsoever your swadharma makes you do. You know, whatsoever job you have to do, whatsoever relations you have with people, keep following that nature. Oh, Ronaldo was there last Wednesday when we had this conversation with our friend. I had a nice conversation with him yesterday. It is the ego who looks upon the loss of identification with the body mind that feels something is lacking. Now, how am I going to define myself? Who am I now? What is left for me to hold on to? Huh? What's left for me to hold on to? And this is a very nice construct, you know. Oh, I don't have anything to, you know, hold on to so that I can define myself. I can define myself as attributes, qualities, and different aspects and functions and talents or experience or knowledge, anything. Nothing to hold on. That's the situation. And then when we are free from anything that we can define ourselves, and then only then we can define ourselves as the fullness of conscious existence, which is not emptiness. There are a lot of notions that the self is emptiness, but Vedanta corrects that notion. It says, no, the self is not of the nature of emptiness. The self is of the nature of fullness. You understand? The only thing is that the self is not an object. And we are used to look at things in a space and say the space is full of things. And now we say the space is empty of things, and then what we miss? We miss the space. The space is full of itself. The space is not empty of anything. The space is full of itself. And consciousness, existence, is whole, full, and complete, because in truth there is only this conscious existence. And everything that appears is nothing but a superimposition, projection of names and forms on that which is this light of conscious existence, awareness that we are. So there is a temptation to panic or to despair. It is at this juncture that the student now finds himself. Some of us who reach this point want to turn back. Some people, they may have this temptation to go back, you know. A lot of the time is referred as the dark night of the soul. When you just understood that you are none of these things, at the same time you did not really look back to see that you are the light of the illuminator of this empty space, you know, and empty field of objects, you know. You are the light in which this empty field of objects occur. So before you turn back and you understand that you are the fullness of this conscious existence, light, one may feel a little bit like panicking or despair. Oh my God, now I am alone. Everybody left me. I have lost my house, my car, and everything, because in the last 15 years, I only want to do self-inquiry and that did not work. It's not our case, so we are not going to that extreme, right? But some people may go. So there is a sense of, oh my God, I have lost so much here. I lost everything by which I used to define myself. At this juncture, some student may say like, oh my God, I'm going to go back to the marketplace and I'm going to enjoy samsara. You know how many times I tried to do that? If from what I remember, 2 or 3 times. I was so fed up and tired of trying to find this enlightenment of this self. And I was literally risking so much. For many years, I was living with no money at all. Having a child, traveling around the world and living in India, having no ticket to go out of India sometimes for a long time, you know, surviving with almost nothing. So, and then comes a point you start seeing the gray hairs begin growing. And then I say, you know what? I'm done with this. You know, I'm going to go back. I'm going to take care of business and prepare for my old age because I cannot do that anymore. You know, it's insane. So at this juncture, that the student now finds himself, and some who reach this point wants to turn back to samsara, to the world of objects. We are like someone just learning to swim who tries to touch bottom and realize that he's far into the deep water and no longer has the support of solid ground beneath his feet. That's a very nice example. Huh? We are trying to swim and say, oh, there is no bottom here, you know, and now what I'm going to do? I have to learn to swim in any case, at any cost, you know. It's a kind of life and death here. I need to swim. There's no way. There's no way. So that's where our courage grows, our desire gets intensified. In the same way, I mean, even if we try to go back, I tell you, I try to go back, but it's so frustrating to go back to samsara. The few times that I tried, now you go back, and then when you go there, things that I used to enjoy before, I couldn't enjoy it anymore. That's why they say that ignorance is bliss. So but once you start tasting something higher, superior, it's very difficult to go back to samsara. The temptation to return to terra firma, that is, to the familiar delusions of duality, arises. It is at such a time that the teacher is essential. The student turns to the teacher and asks for help, for some way to keep from drawing in what appears to be emptiness, an ocean of void of emptiness. And the teacher provides the help needed as unfolded in the following verse. Oh, now I got excited about this following verse. Huh? It seems like great fun ahead of us here today. Yeah, because he said, isn't there something else to be known through this inquiry? Please, don't leave me here in this emptiness. So the next verse says, the teacher said, yes, there is something other than this emptiness, and that is the knower of the emptiness. That is you, and you are limitless awareness. You are an adept at inquiry. You are an adept at inquiry. What it means, what is this phrase denoting? You mean that you are a qualified inquirer, huh?
Yeah, he's complimenting him.
Compliment, yeah. So you are a qualified inquirer. So take it easy. I mean, it's encouragement. Don't panic. Be strong. Stay strong. You are a good qualified inquirer, you know, and you are that limitless awareness. So you are the knower of the emptiness. So it's more or less what we have covered so far. So we are that light in which emptiness is revealed, experienced, and known. With a few words, the teacher has shifted the student's focus from the ego to the self. Huh? That's the only thing we can do again and again to ourselves and to other people when we find some friends in this position. Again and again, he'll say, okay, who is witnessing this and this and this problem? Who is witnessing this and this condition, you know? I mean, that was the main teaching and the only trick, you know, in the teachings of Ramana Maharaj, you know? I mean, in which, I mean, who are you? In which conscious light is this thing being experienced? Which is more or less what Moji did, from what I remember when I met the videos of Moji in YouTube in the early days. So he was all the time pointing, you know, shifting the attention of the student from the phenomenal object whatsoever that the ego was experiencing to the self, the light in which the ego, the intellect, and the experience gained through the intellect, all of that is objectified, and you say, okay, so to whom is it all happening? You know, this ego, the experience of the ego, and the suffering, and so on. It's a shift of attention, of focus, of direction, you know. He has taken his attention away from the void left by the negations and placed the attention to that which witness the negations and which even now witness the student's feeling of emptiness. But this is a very, very subtle topic or subject here, you know. When it says like the teacher has taken his attention away from the void, from the experience of emptiness, okay, by the negation, and the teacher shifted his attention, placed it on that which witnessed the negations. So again, we have this situation, you know. So the teaching is telling him, disconnect from phenomenal object. Don't be focused on the intellect and the experience that occurs through the intellect. And get the intellect and turn its attention, because the attention is only possible through the intellect. Turn the attention of the intellect to that which witness the intellect and the experience gained through the intellect. Now, how can the intellect turn its attention to that which witness the intellect, the ego? You understand? If that is not an object of attention, it's not an object of experience, it's not an object of knowledge. You understand? So it's the most subtle teaching of Vedanta. You're just turning the intellect upon that which is the true witnessing principle, which is not an experiencing entity, is a non-experiencing witnessing principle. Okay, so how the intellect is going to turn about that to that, if that is not an object is not subject to objectification, you know, is something that we need to look, because otherwise we're going to be running into contradictions here. So the intellect has to come to a point of being ready to commit suicide. It has to negate itself, and he can understand that there is a line shining here, and the line that shines in my intellect is extroverting my mind, and I'm trying to find myself out there, and I have to understand that I am this light, this original light that shines in my pure intellect, you understand? And that, of course, is, as a matter of speak, is a way of shifting the attention, but it's not a shift that you can do it as we do with perception. It's just in your understanding. You understand that the self is not emptiness. The self is nothing. The self is the very light that shines in my intellect, and I need to understand that. It's only possible to begin, you know, this shift of identity by the means of knowledge and understanding. After the 5 sheaths have been shown to be unreal, the ego, the intellect, which is the tendency of awareness to rest in objects, retains an inertial force. Now I want to go back here to conclude that. He has taken his attention away from the void. So the teacher helped him to take his attention from the void, left by the negations, and placed it on that which witness the negations and which even now witness the students' feeling of emptiness and frustration and desolation and so on. So you have to turn your attention to that which is the real witness, non-experienced principle, and that can only be done through intellectual understanding, of one's true nature. There is a certain experiential element to it, because the self shines in the mind as an eye. You understand? And this eye is the only eye there is. Okay? So this consciousness that we see, this awareness that we see flowing through our intellect, is something that can be understood, and it has also a certain experiential feel to it, because we are all the time shine, and we shine in the minds, in the subtle bodies of all living creatures. You understand? And we can sense it. We can sense it. So if my mind, if my attention, my cognition ability is too much turned outwards, I need to cognitively, I need to bring it to the understand of the source of my light, the source of this consciousness that shines up, lightens up my intellect. You understand? I don't know if I'm doing a good job in trying to help you to understand how simple this all is,
Hey, Arlindo. Sometimes I think of this as the witness of the witness.
Well,
Understand the original witness who's witnessing the intelligence.
Yeah, but it's a dangerous concept, the witness of the witness, because we begin splitting the witness in two. You understand? There is only. Are you saying something?
Sorry?
No, because I was talking.
No, I was listening to you reply.
Okay. No, it's a little bit tricky, because when we say it's a witness of the witness, and then we go like, okay, there is an awareness behind awareness, and that can go on and on and on, because there is all this kind of notions floats around in the spiritual world. But the fact is that this awareness is non-dual. There is only one awareness. You understand? There is only one witnessing principle. And this witnessing conscious principle shines in the mind, in the intellect of the jiva, and appears as the individual witnessing cognitive, mind. I mean, the individual jiva is the experiencing, witnessing entity, which witness what? Witness everything below its intellectual ability. It witnesses its feelings, its emotions, its thoughts, witnesses its auto-image, self-image, its ego, and so on, its prana. So the intellect can witness any and everything. The witness cannot witness the causal body, but can understand the causal body by inferential knowledge. And the intellect, it can understand its true nature, not inferentially, directly. By understanding the words of the Upanishads and then even capturing the experience that this conscious existence shines in our own mind. You understand? And there is only one witnessing principle. And this witnessing principle, Mark, when it shines in the intellect of the jiva, it becomes the experiencing, witnessing entity, the entity, the experienced entity. So the true, the absolute witnessing consciousness is not an experiencing entity. It's not really a knowing, experiencing entity, but it's the same witnessing principle. It shines in the intellect of the jiva to become the experiencing entity. Before, it's not an experiencing entity, but it is the same witnessing principle. That's why the jiva, Atma, can say, I am Paramatma, Tatvamasi. Jiva Atma equals Paramatma, because both are this witnessing conscious existence principle. The jiva becomes the experiencing knowing entity, and that Paramatma is not an experiencing knowing entity, but the principle that shines in the intellect of the jiva is the same principle that lends conscious existence to all creatures, to all beings in the universe. You understand? So it's not really that there is a witnessing of the witnessing in a kind of experiential dualistic term. No, there is only one. It's one principle that becomes an experienced entity to the degree that it shines in the subtle bodies of all jivas. That's why we can talk of non-duality as reality, otherwise we can't. After the 5 sheaths have been shown to be unreal, the ego, which is the tendency of awareness to rest in objects, oh how nice, the tendency of awareness of resting in objects. No? The ego, what a beautiful definition of the ego. Huh? The ego is the tendency of consciousness to rest in objects. Huh? I mean, Vedanta is so amazing. The ego, which is the tendency of awareness to rest in objects, retains as an initial force. In other words, this tendency, this extroversion of our conscious mind, our intellect, this extroversion, which is nothing but consciousness, to this tendency to associate and get entangled with the worlds, the world of objects, it still remains. There is a momentum that takes time, you understand? It keeps going a little bit longer, You need to know that. We have negated everything and so on. We know I am conscious existence, but this vasana, this tendency to hook up with the world of objects, it remains for a little bit. It looks at the body-mind in that case. The inquirer looks at the body-mind and at the 3 states of the 5 sheaths, but can find no place to rest. Why? I can no longer define myself by the means of the 3 bodies, the 3 states, and the 5 koshas, because I understood so that I am the subject principle in which all these objects come and go. So once we have this subject-object vasana very, very properly established in our minds, this Satyamitya vasana, and then we keep rejecting all experience, we keep just say no, thank you, no, thank you. Why? It's not that we're against experience, just because I'm on a journey here. My journey is to really, isolate this light from everything, that somehow it got confused with, so that I can break this inertial force. At that point, the inquirer looks at the body-mind, it looks at the 3 states and the 5 sheaths, and it can no longer find place to rest, to hook, to define itself, because it's clear now, I'm nothing that I can see, objectify, and experience is worth defining myself, such as, because, I'm suffering because I have defined myself with things that come and go, with fleeting experience, and things that have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So now that I have this clear vasana, this clear discrimination in my mind, there's nothing that I can really get hold and attach and hold myself and define myself. So I can find no place in which I can rest. As its substratum, awareness no longer identifies with this seeming object. So, on the other hand, the inquirer that now came all the way with this work. It looks at the body, mind, and the three states, but can find no place to rest, as its substratum awareness no longer identifies with this seeming object. So at this point, the mind of the inquirer is clear. It says, I am the substratum, I am the light, I am the space in which all these things occur, okay? And none of this is what I am, because I cannot be what I witness, I cannot be what I objectify, I cannot be what I see, I cannot be what I experience. So I am the awareness, all of this occurs in me, but none of this is real. I am the substratum, and therefore I no longer identify myself with any of these things. So it does not mean that these objects of experience are going to disappear. It means that I no longer identify myself by or through my contacts or my objects of experience or my experience and so on. So at this point, it wonders, if I'm none of these things, what am I then? The teacher answers, you are that which knows all, even the emptiness that you are experiencing. Tatvamasi. You are that. And in that, everything is known. You are that which knows, and you know the presence of objects of experience, and you know the absence of objects of experience. You are the witness of all that comes and goes. And the intellect comes and goes as well. The intellect is the experiencing entity. The witnessing, experiencing, knowing entity. The intellect comes and goes, come and go, come and go, come and go, comes and goes. We go to sleep, it rests, or we go in certain states of meditation. The intellect may even go into Nirvikalpa Samadhi. So I am that which witness all these changing phenomena, changing things. The aim of Vedanta is to effect this shift. It's shift of attention. So we can put it, this shift of attention, we can put it as a shift of identity, a shift of identification. So if before I am identified as the experiencing, witnessing entity, experiencing entity, the intellect, the ego, and now one identifies as the light. Beautiful, can you hear that? So the aim of Vedanta is to effect this shift of identity, this shift of attention, as if consciousness would finally enough turn its attention upon itself, It's a little funny, a consciousness in association, under the spell of Maya, becomes extroverted and gets entangled with object, and then finally enough, consciousness turns upon itself. Papaji used to play with this notion, turn the mind upon consciousness, turn consciousness upon itself. So the aim of Vedanta is to effect this shift of attention from that which is known to the witnessing conscious awareness in which things are known. The aim of Vedanta is to effect this shift of attention from that which is known, the object, to that witness awareness in which everything is known. Again, it's the play of the intellect. The intellect has to somehow understand its true source, you know, its true nature, its true identity. And I am the light. You know, I become the knower and the experiencing here, but I am this limitless light of conscious awareness, existence. The student has arrived at a crucial stage in his inquiry. The student has arrived at a crucial stage in his inquiry. It's too beautiful. I'm sorry. I can't say anything anymore. It's much better than words, huh? Every time I do satsang here, they come somehow. The student has arrived at a crucial stage in his inquiry, and he has asked the right question, for which the teacher commands him. We have a deeply ingrained habit of thinking we are the objects we perceived. How about that? So we don't have that much of a trouble. So when I see Claudio, I don't believe that I am Claudio. It does not mean exactly that way, you know. Or if I see David, I say, "Oh, look at that. This is my body, David." You know. No, but somehow we define ourselves by our experience. Our experience, they by and by they define us, you know, and the experience are objects. It's an ingrained habit of thinking that we are defined by our experience, by objects that we perceive. So of course, when we look at our body, we identify with the body, and then we think we are the body. We perceive our mind, our emotions, our memories, and so on. And we define ourselves, you know. But when I go out and I see a car, if the car belongs to the neighbor, I don't define myself by that car. But when I see my car, I say, okay, I am also defined by my new car. You know, I have a nice car now, and so on. So we tend to identify ourselves with the objects we perceive and we own, I and mine, I and mine, I and mine. And even when objects are negated, even when we know the body-mind to be the not-self, the ego resurrects and steers our doubts and fears, telling us that we have lost everything when we have lost nothing but the very source of our miseries. Oh no, oh my God, now I have no misery left. I have no means to suffer with my attachments and with my identification with objects. So, I mean, the only thing we have to lose when we get into this work with Vedanta is our ignorance. The ignorance is I am my experience. You know, I get confused with my personal experience, and I define myself by my experience. And this is ignorance. And to define myself as my experience, you know, it's a source of pain and suffering and misery. We suffer a lot when we begin to define ourselves by our own experience. Why? Because the experience, they change all the time, and we wish we could hold on to the good ones. We wish we could really hold on to those beautiful, wonderful, pleasant experience, you know, highly rated experience that other people are going to appreciate and so on. So, but we have no control, and then we suffer. So the aim of Vedanta is to break with this identification. And then the only thing we have to lose is our ignorance, which is nothing but the root cause of suffering. So who does not want to lose suffering, no? To be free from suffering and misery. So when we have lost nothing but the source of our miseries, the source of our miseries is the ignorance. The ignorance is I am the body-mind, and I define this body-mind by my experiences, which makes up my history, my life history, and so on, my person, my personality, and so on. Of course, there is one loser in this whole process, and this loser is the Mr. Ego. And the Mr. Ego needs to understand that. Otherwise, it's going to throw a tantrum, and it's going to make things difficult. You understand? So the Mr. Ego has to understand, okay, so this is all delusion. I thought that I was consciousness. I thought that I was the true self, the true I, and so on. And now I understood that, you know, I'm just a medium. I'm just an agent here. You know, I'm an employee. Huh? I was employed here so that consciousness can have an experience until it recognizes itself in media. So when the ego somehow understands and puts itself in its proper place, you understand? And then the ego, they just can be an enjoyer. It's a contradiction, but only then the ego can be an enjoyer, because he was managed and reduced to its proper dimension, proportion. I'm just an agent here. I'm just a medium of knowledge experience by which consciousness can play this game. So the ego, this delusional ego, is the one who's going to suffer and feel like, oh my God, you know, I'm alone here and I have nothing, and nobody's paying attention and respect to me, and so on. So the ego is going to lose in this process, because it will look into the void that it always was and dissolves, but just as the snake that never was dissolves into the knowledge of the rope. So now we have this metaphor of the dissolution of the ego, which is a good topic for us to look as well, because we will need to define what the ego is. Understand? The ego is a sense of authorship, doership, you know. And I think my thoughts, and I manage my thoughts and actions, and I control my life, and so on. So this sense of authorship and doership is nothing but ignorance of the true, you know, ignorance of the real facts of nature, because the ego, the sense I, the agent I, the medium here, you know, if he really examines his position, he will understand that, you know, he is not really the doer and the controller, the author, and so on. You know, there are many other factors involved, and then it can keep itself, you know, in its own position, and then he's good. There is still a sense of ego, because the ego is the I thought. This I thought who experiences and knows phenomenon, object, is the ego still. If we define the ego as total ignorance of the laws, these laws of total ignorance of this relationship between between the ego, the jiva, Ishvara in the field, which is Karma Yoga, Dharma Yoga, if it's totally ignorant, and then we say, okay, ego is this. Ego is this ignorance, total avidya, you know. But the idea of total dissolution of the ego, it gives some people the impression that, oh my God, I'm going to disappear, the ego is going to disappear, you know, and I'm not going to be able to function anymore. No, the ego remains, but it remains in its proper place, understand? It's like there is this king, and then he goes out, and then all the servants and the employees, they start making party, and then the guy who was the boss of all other servants, you know, starts sitting on the throne, and he starts playing the king and the boss and so on, and then the king comes a little bit one day earlier, you know, and then by then the boss was already behaving like a king, and he was having a hard time to accept, you know, that I'm just another servant here. So when the ego takes its proper place and understand, no, I'm just an agent here, a medium, okay? And my job here is to live in harmony with all other creatures, all other beings, and behave with a certain attitude, so that I can keep this dharma field in balance, you know. And then this is a good ego, you know. It's a good ego. It knows it. I'm just a servant here, you know. So the ego does not dissolve in a sense that somebody is not going to be able to do anything anymore in life. That's what I'm trying to make a point here. But here it says the only loser in this process is the Mr. Ego, which looks into the void that it always was, and dissolves. It dissolves in the void, just as the snake that never was dissolves into the knowledge of the rope. It's true, because self-knowledge is the firm and clear understanding that the jiva, the ego, is Paramatma. Jivatma is Paramatma. The ego is not really the ego. The intellect is not really the intellect. Although the intellect as a medium to experience and transact with the world will remain. But the intellect understands that the reality of the fact here is that Jivatma is Paramatma. You understand? Jivatma is just conscious awareness, existence that shines in my mind to turn me into an agent, an experiencing agent, knowing agent. But I know that although I am an employee, I'm an agent, you know, I am fundamentally, I am conscious awareness existence, you know, and I just follow my nature, follow my dharmas here, knowing that I am this, I am Brahman. So therefore, there is a certain intellectual dissolution of the ego from the standpoint of total ignorance of the ego, who believed that he was the king and he was sitting the throne of the king, you know. But then the snake metaphor is a nice one. Just as the snake that never was dissolves in the knowledge of the rope. The negations, this negation, this discrimination, this rejection of any and everything that appears within the light of my awareness. I'm not negating, saying for the sake of negate. I'm just negating reality. I'm just negating these things as a means to define myself, to complete myself. Everything will continue appearing, but I'm no longer giving a value to it that it does not belong to it. It belongs to me, you understand? All these things that appear within my light of conscious awareness, they have a certain utilitarian values, you know, practical values, but they don't really have values except the ones that I give to them. So therefore, I keep negating it. This negation must be repeated. This vasana to discriminate all these objects as value neutral must be reinforced by an ever vigilant discrimination again and again and again and again. That's why Vedanta is for the very few, you know. You see, we are here, G6, G7, G8, because we are here, everybody into doing this tough work of isolating conscious awareness from the intellect and claiming our identity as free awareness. No? So we need to do it repeatedly, and we need to reinforce this Satyamitya Vasana, this subject-object Vasana. And we need to keep a vigilant, ever vigilant discrimination. We are trying to free ourselves from identifications, identifications that have become habitual. So habitual means to say it has become binding vasanas. The identifications with the body-mind, with the intellect, by which all world objects are experienced, you know, and then the body-mind defines itself by its experience. This is such a vasana. It's more than a habit, it's a binding vasana, you know. It's a binding addiction of identifying myself from my experience again and again, and this experience, that subtle experience, this spiritual experience, that experience. So, I mean, I have people again and again coming to me talking about their beautiful spiritual, mystical experience, and my job is just trying to remind and direct them to the light in which all this spiritual experience appear, you know, and say, reject it, reject it, reject it. We are trying to free ourselves from identifications. These identifications have become addictions, binding vasanas. So what do we need to do? We need to create a new vasana, a new addiction, a new habit. We need a habit to destroy the old habit. We need a Thor to pull the Thor that went into my foot when I was walking the forest. You guys know this analogy and this story. So we need now a new vasana. We need a Satyamitya vasana. We need a discriminating vasana. We need to make this vasana, binding vasana, habit, an addiction again and again. I'm just isolating the light of the illuminated from everything that I reveal and know. So, a binding discrimination vasana is required. What do you guys think about that? A binding discriminating vasana is required. Oh no, I don't want to know about binding vasana anymore. There are bad vasanas and there are good vasanas. We need a good vasanas to destroy the bad vasanas, and then we are free from all vasanas, you know. But we need to develop this discriminating vasana.
I feel like we need it so that we can practice. You know, it calls for repeated practice, and we have to get into that discipline of repeated practice. And so the binding vasana is to always remember to do the repeated practice of discriminating.
Totally. Well, we need to develop this habit, this vasana, discriminating vasana, in order to intensify this process of self-knowledge, of self-inquiry. Otherwise, we do it only once in a while. You understand? We begin doing once in a while. I just did a seminar here in Brazil of 8 days. It was very intense, very beautiful. and I can see already, you know. And I already knew, everybody was saying like, yeah, Vedanta, we are hot, we want it, we want moksha and this and that. And then I was telling people, hey, go easy, because it's very rare to find people with a desire for moksha, you know. You may be wanting moksha, but you may be wanting to have some fun or something else, you know. And then our seminar here ended, and we have had already several web classes, of Vedanta. And basically, of the group of 20 new people that were here, or 20 or more, only 2 people were showing up to the class, which tells that, they don't have that intense vasana, that strong vasana to really go for this discrimination all through. It takes time to develop this habitual desire, this desire to keep doing this work, because I understood the value of self-knowledge. And self-knowledge is not a 8 days experience of a retreat or anything. Self-knowledge is something that has to carry on through our lives. Right, David? And if we want to intensify this self-inquiry, we need to develop this habit, this vasana. And we need it. Why? Because we have another vasana that we have to offset. No, the vasana of hooking up with the world of objects and define myself as my experience. So now we need to undo that, and we need another vasana who does the job. And then it ends up saying that moksha is not a discrete experience. So how about that? I mean, people keep still, I know I have some students, some friends that they're very, very close to this final understanding, but they easily get still misled to believe that there is a certain experience, spiritual experience there that have a value as moksha, And then you see, moksha is not an experience. Moksha is not like epiphanies that sometimes occur in meditation. No. None of this. That's when I like to say that self-knowledge is only about knowledge and knowledge alone. There's nothing to do with experience. Self-knowledge is going to change the way we experience the world. It's going to change the way we experience media. But self-knowledge may even allow us to experientially feel the light of consciousness shine in our intellect, regardless of the proportions of the 3 gunas. There is a feel to it as well. And this, I think, is something that we all can sense. But moksha is none of this experience, although it changed the way we experience nitya. Like the epiphanies that sometimes occur in meditation. Moksha is the knowledge that must become firm through persistent application, persistence, discrimination, persistent sadhana, persistence, contemplation, shravana, manana, jidhyasana. It needs to, it does not need anything, but moksha is something, it's a byproduct of this intense search, the intense sadhana, jnana yoga sadhana, And this sadhana has to manifest as self-knowledge, and this self-knowledge must become hard and fast or firm and always present. So when this knowledge is hard and fast, it's firm and always present, and then we can navigate in mithya and with a certain, how you say, buffer, we have a certain immunity or resistance against the crises and difficulties that life throws at us, because now I understood my primary nature as consciousness, and nothing can affect that. And this certainty, doubtless knowledge, is only possible through persistence, application of this knowledge, persistence sadhana. And then the paragraph ends with Vedanta requires work. It does not only require to show up once or twice a week. It begins like that, but ultimately, in order to get this knowledge and retain this knowledge firmly, at all times, we need to do this work, this dedication, this persistence, applying the knowledge. So Vedanta requires work. And that's where people don't usually, what people usually do not like to hear, because they like more the Sangha, the energy, the Shakti and you know, of the groups and the retreats. But when we think of doing the work ourselves, and say, oh, doing the work myself, home I have other things to do. I mean, I'm watching a nice series on Netflix, and then I have children, I have this, I have that. So no, we do it once in a while when we meet in satsang. That's all right. It's gonna grow sooner or later, you understand? To become an intense desire and an intense application of self-knowledge, self-inquiry. You know? Okay, so next week we begin from verse 65. If anyone has something to say or question or complain, so this is the best moment to. I'm so glad we have this G7, G8, G6 work group. Huh? It's much better than G2, G3.
I'm gonna formulate a question and send it now.
Huh?
And I think I'll formulate a question like based upon this discussion and send it now in the hopes that we could cover it maybe on Thursday.
Yeah, we cover it on Thursday. Yeah. Okay. Because my voice is not very strong today. To preserve it a little bit and rest it. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, everyone. Lovely meeting with you again. And I'm gonna change the name of our group in the YouTube, and I will say the G7 group. So we stay in the middle, not G6, not G7, G8, G7.
Plus or minus.
Plus or minus.
Bye.
Bye-bye. See you next Thursday.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Linda. Bye now.
Thank you. Thank you.